On today's episode of Felony Spectator, we're talking about Tara and Stephen Grant. We're going to find out what happens when Stephen made the biggest mistake of his life. Tara Grant was a very successful businesswoman, and according to her family, she was also very loving to both of her kids. Tara was from Macomb County, Michigan, and she graduated from Michigan State University, earning herself a bachelor's degree in business. She soon started working for Washington Group Internationals, and this job required Tara to frequently travel, but Tara didn't mind. She was working her way up the ladder and was very successful at what she did. Yes, it did take her away from her family more than she liked, but she did her best to fly home on weekends, special occasions, and for the kids' important functions. Tara met her husband, Stephen Grant, while attending Michigan State University. Stephen had proposed to Tara on the steps of the Detroit Institute of Arts because Tara had loved art so much. He thought this would make her incredibly happy, and they soon got married and had 2 children together. Tara was really outgoing and very driven, while Grant was more passive and less motivated about things. Some would say that their match just seemed kind of odd. Some of Grant's friends would say that they were really surprised that Tara and Grant ended up together, and they would joke and say that he would be the type of guy who would rob a bank and leave his business card, implying that he wasn't very smart, They thought Tara was just way out of his league. She was driven, she was smart, she was organized, a lot of things that Stephen wasn't. His friends would also go on to say that Stephen hit the jackpot with her. Opposites do attract, so no judgments here. Stephen also attended Michigan State University, but he would leave school just 11 credits shy from a degree. He wanted to focus more on politics, but unfortunately having a family and a busy schedule, it would prevent him from further pursuing politics. So he never ended up doing that either. He would eventually work in a tool and die shop that his family owned. Tara and Stephen made a decent amount of money between the two of them, but Tara was definitely the main breadwinner of the family. They lived in a really nice neighborhood, both drove new cars, the kids were also enrolled in private schools as well. They even had hired an au pair from Germany named Verna Dirks. I hope I'm saying her last name right. They needed some help with the kids and upkeep of the home since both Stephen and Tara worked full-time. Tara was really proud that her hard work was giving her kids a wonderful life, even if it meant that she had to travel a lot. Sadly, on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2007, Stephen would call the sheriff's office and report that Tara was missing. She had in fact been missing for 5 days. According to Stephen, this was not the first time she left after an argument, and he presumed that she flew back to Puerto Rico where she was working at the time. That's why he didn't report her disappearance sooner. But she never made it on the plane Sunday evening, and she wasn't returning his phone calls either. He would tell police that on the night of Friday, February 9th, Tara had come home from Puerto Rico where she was working, and the couple had been in a heated argument. It apparently started when Tara said she was going to go back to work early on Sunday. The argument escalated, but would also turn into one that they had often, which was about power struggles and who was the real boss of the house. He thought Tara's constant traveling meant that he was the one in charge. Tara, being the breadwinner, a perfectionist, and the mom, would argue that she was. Now that was according to Stephen. He would also accuse Tara of cheating, possibly with a coworker while she was away on business or an ex-boyfriend. At the end of the argument, he said he overheard Tara whisper into the phone, "I will meet you in the end of the driveway," and he would see her climb into an unknown black car, never to be seen from or heard from again. When Stephen reported Tara missing, police had done a quick search of the home and they found nothing major out of the ordinary. A few small oddities like a scratch on Stephen's nose, which he later claimed that Tara had slapped him across the face during their argument. And they also noted that Tara didn't take any glasses with her, which would be strange if she was heading back to work early because she would have needed to at least bring one pair of glasses with her back to Puerto Rico. Stephen would just say that she must have forgotten them because she was in such a hurry. Stephen would also seem overly cooperative during that first visit with police. Police would say that he seemed nervous and a bit fidgety. Now, sometimes when people are overly helpful or overly talkative, it could mean that they're nervous or hiding something. Now, nervous doesn't necessarily mean guilty, but when a spouse goes missing, it's just not the typical reaction that they're used to seeing. So right off the bat, the police thought that something seemed off. Mothers generally don't go missing from nice upscale neighborhoods. And who was this mysterious person she left with in the dark-colored car? When asked what Stephen did after Tara got into the car, Stephen would say, "I gave up. I was tired of bickering about all the travel. All I could do was close the garage door." Stephen would then leave several messages on Tara's cell phone, starting the night she disappeared. He was seemingly devastated, and at times, he was trying to be an active part of the investigation with police and would say that he wanted to also be a part of the search party. The day after Stephen reported Tara missing, police actually had arrested him and brought him to the police station for a minor traffic infraction. They wanted to use that opportunity to question him further about Tara's disappearance. This started some tension with the police and Stephen. He would then hire his own private detective to help find Tara. Stephen would also go on to make several media appearances almost daily. He wanted Tara back, and he would say that he hopes that she was just cheating and not meant with foul play. He would say he was emotionally exhausted, and he would insist he didn't know where Tara was. He would be weepy on live TV, claiming she left in this mysterious dark sedan, and he'd beg her to come home. He just missed her, and the kids missed her, and he just wanted her home. Despite being so devastated, every day he would continue his daily routine, walk through his garage with his kids, wave at his neighbors on the way to the bus stop, and people thought he was being a good father, and they actually felt really bad for him. A few weeks after Tara's disappearance, in a strange turn of events, a former girlfriend of Grant's turned over a letter to the Detroit News that Stephen Grant wrote her on January 25th before Tara went missing. It would say that Stephen was mocking his marriage vows and offered the woman to practice sponge baths on him as she was a nursing student at the time, and other inappropriate things. He would also question his wife's relations with an ex-boyfriend or one of her co-workers. When questioned about this, Stephen would laugh this off and say it was just a joke. They were private emails sent to an old friend. He admitted that he asked her if he could see her naked and would go on to say, quote, "Men always want to see women naked," end quote. Like, that's acceptable. Family and friends at this point were now suspecting foul play. Tara would never leave her kids. She loved them too much. It was also out of character for Tara not to be in touch. Even if she had gone back to work early, which she didn't, she would have called. She would have checked on the kids. She loved them way too much. Stephen was also starting to act a bit strange in his interviews with the media as well. After his appearances, he would ask the staff how he seemed. It was almost like he needed validation that the world was seeing him as this worried husband. And he would even ask the media how it would seem if he decided to go for a jog through the park. Apparently, the Grants' favorite place to run was through Stony Creek Metro Park, and he needed to go for a run, but he was very worried about how the world would perceive him. In that very same park, a woman would stumble across a Ziploc bag just outside a tree in the snow. Inside were gloves, metal shavings, and blood, which later turned out to be a match to Tara Grant. Stephen now became very uncooperative. Any questions police had needed to go directly through an attorney, and he even refused a polygraph test with the police. Police later learned that he actually did a polygraph test privately on his own, but those results came back inconclusive. It's not really known why he did that, but I can only imagine that he was practicing. Just curious to see if he could beat the polygraph test. But polygraph tests are also very unreliable and they can't even be used in court. So it's a bit strange that he even went to all the trouble to do that. When police got a positive ID on Tara's blood in the park, they arranged to have the rest of the park searched. Stephen would also turn over 2 home computers to authorities, and he still claimed his innocence and would say on TV that police were just harassing him. On Friday, March 2nd, Stephen had one last interview with media, and this time Stephen was clearly distraught in this interview. Instead of being worried for Tara, he would almost start a rant saying that she treated him like a valet and she was a bad mother for not spending enough time with her kids. Stephen would call himself the better mom, taking the kids swimming, to school, to soccer practice. He would even go on to say that Tara did leave angry that night, that they got in their heated argument, and he would claim his innocence one last time. What Stephen didn't know was that hours later, police would be in his house searching for clues after obtaining a search warrant for the home. They also got a search warrant for Stephen's place of business. Stephen would arrive home as police were searching his house. He would walk around very nervously, and then he would eventually ask police if he could take the dog for a walk. Stephen wasn't under arrest at this point. They still haven't found anything, so he was free to do whatever he liked, so Stephen left. Detectives that were present during the initial visit back on Valentine's Day noticed a large Rubbermaid tote in the garage that wasn't there previously, and it seemed a bit out of place. Inside the tote, they would discover a torso of a body. She was still wearing her bra, dressed from the waist down. However, her pants were cut at the top of her legs. The rest of her was gone. Stephen didn't return home from walking the dog, and he instead borrowed a yellow truck from a friend and was planning to escape. The next morning, police would make an announcement that they found body parts in the Grants' home, and a manhunt began to find Stephen to seek murder charges against him. They were trying to trace his phone, and his phone was actually pinging all over Michigan. He was loading up on alcohol, pills, razor blades, and a toy gun. He was either planning on committing suicide by the pills or suicide by cop. Presumably, he was hoping that pointing this toy gun at police that they would have no choice but to fire back. On March 3rd, Stephen would make a couple more phone calls, one being his sister, just to make sure that the kids were okay. Police would then trace this phone call back to the Wilderness State Park where he and Tara used to go camping. Now, this time of year, the temperatures were still freezing. There was still snow on the ground, and Stephen had walked into the park without shoes or a jacket of any kind. By the time they found Stephen, he was curled up under a tree and was suffering from severe hypothermia and barely able to speak. He would be airlifted to Northern Michigan Hospital, and finally, on March 5th, Stephen would give a full confession to killing his wife and dismembering her body. So what actually happened? In Stephen's written confession, he would say that Tara was still unpacking and getting changed for bed while they started arguing. When she told him she was going to be leaving early on Sunday to go back to work, they got in a heated argument. At this point, he grabbed Tara's wrist and told her that she wasn't going anywhere. Back to work, presumably. And she slapped him. He struck her back or pushed her, and she fell, hitting her head on the ground. Then she threatened that she was going to take the kids and that he'd be homeless and he was a piece of shit, so he started choking her. He would say at first he was only grabbing her neck to make her stop talking and just to make her shut up, but he just couldn't stop squeezing her. He couldn't let go. So he would choke her for over 4 minutes, only stopping briefly to cover her face with a piece of clothing. This is when Stephen panicked. He didn't want to go to jail for this. The kids were still sleeping, so he would grab a belt, put it around her neck, and drag her down the stairs. He then put Tara in the back of her own SUV and goes back into the house. Stephen would start leaving voicemails on Tara's phone to cover his tracks, and he would tell the nanny that Tara had left him. 2 days later, he would drive Tara's vehicle to his father's machine shop where he would use a bandsaw to dismember Tara's body. He would also use a bow saw to destroy her laptop because he knew Tara would travel back to work with it, and he needed to make sure that she took it with her. He threw away her purse, business cards, and business documents. He wrapped her up in pieces of plastic, used his kid's sled to drag body pieces through Stony Creek Nature Area, and hid the evidence. He would also discard his shoes and the saw blades as well in the snow. He knew he didn't really hide the body very well, so he actually went back a second time and scattered her body parts deeper into the woods and buried her torso in a new spot in the snow. When he learned of the large-scale search that was going to happen after the Ziploc bag was found, he went back a third time to retrieve the torso, as that was a large part of her body that was poorly hidden. He first took her torso back to his father's machine shop and hid her on the roof in a built-in room that was up there for several days. He then got worried that Tara's torso may start to smell or thaw out, and he knew he needed to dispose of it. So he brings it home and places the tote in the garage. Now, this is perfect timing for the police because that was the night before they came in with their search warrant. He might have tried hiding the body a third time if he had more time himself. Stephen was found guilty of second-degree murder and the mutilation of a corpse, sentenced to 50 years of prison with no parole. His kids have since changed their last name and are presumably living with Tara's sister. Even though justice was served in this case, it's just awful. I know people do some pretty drastic stuff when they're feeling desperation, but I can never understand why people go forward with chopping up a person. That's just beyond terrible. Why? Ugh. This case is more than just someone who snapped, which I hate when people use that excuse, a crime of passion. But he made so many bad choices and he just kept making them. I think his friends were right when they suspected that he wasn't very intelligent. Sadly, the au pair would also be very traumatized by this whole thing. I mean, I didn't really talk about her much, but he ended up seducing her, and they actually also had sexual relations after he killed Tara, and she just cried up on the stands and went back to Germany and never wants to be heard from again. It's very, very sad. Anyway, thanks for joining me here at Felony Spectator. And if you like what you heard, please hit subscribe and share with your friends so we can grow our community. I hope you guys all have a great day. Thanks again. Bye.